stand right here and you look that way, okay?
Okay, Irene.
Good. You want to stand with him?
Yes. You want to stand with them.
You don't want to stand there, though. That's
Just
not
right
hiding
next to
behind
here.
there.
Right next to you because they're going to speak
Right.
there, okay? And it's going to be the senator and
The speaker.
the speaker.
The speaker will watch out for you. The guys just.
Guys, nah, maybe not so
But
much.
you got the speaker and I.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Come up here, Nancy. Nancy? Nancy, come up here. Come right here. Come right here, Nancy. Come right here. Okay, I think we're ready to start, and I'd like to thank all of my colleagues who are here, of course, our great speaker, and I'd like to particularly thank Debbie Stabenow, who helped bring this whole event together and invite so many of us here. Now, ahead of the State of the Union, we're here to call out the Republican sabotage on our health care system. There's a high likelihood later tonight that President Trump will gloat about how Republicans want better, cheaper health care for everybody. But in reality, the President and congressional Republicans have put America's health care in grave danger. Mr. President, if you really care about health care, you'll announce tonight that you're withdrawing your Texas lawsuit that would remove all protections for pre-existing conditions that people need so badly. Right now, while we stand in this room, the Trump administration is pushing a lawsuit that would strike down the Affordable Care Act in its entirety. This isn't an exaggeration. President gets on the podium, says he wants great health care. And at the same time, what he's actually doing, the thing that'll make an effect far more than his words, is this lawsuit in Texas, which with the courts the way they are these days, has a real danger to pass and take away health care from all of these beautiful young people and so many other people here today. Now, I'll be joined this evening. He's stuck in traffic. They drove down from the Bronx, but here he is. This is Jonathan, and it's not Prince, but he's dressed here. Let me show my colleagues. He's not.
Oh, yeah,
Look at him. Is he great?
Purple.
Yes. Jonathan is 6.5. He's Jonathan Gasto. It's pronounced, Jonathan is from the Bronx, and he was born with congenital heart defects that were recognized as a particular seizure disorder called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And he has a seizure disorder and chronic lung disease. He sees about 10 pediatric specialists. He's endured 3 surgeries, multiple hospitalizations in his 6 years of his little, beautiful, cute life. But the Affordable Care Act, thank God, has given Jonathan and his family a lifeline. Thanks to the ACA, Jonathan gets the care he needs, and he can dress up as Prince. Now, he gets doctor's visits, he gets surgeries, he gets prescription drugs, and he gets home care. Jonathan's not alone. He's one of millions and millions of young people and tens of millions of adults who need protection when an insurance company says, I'm going to rip your insurance away or not give you insurance because you have a certain illness. That's not America. That's not what health care is all about. There are now, right now, because of President Trump's nasty efforts, 400,000 fewer kids with health care than in 2016. So the stakes couldn't be higher. This is not politics, this is people. This is who we care about. This is the vitality of America and the future and hope of so many people, young people and their families here in America. If Republicans get their way, the protections that millions of families, millions of children like little Jonathan will be destroyed. Democrats refuse to let this happen. Speaker Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. I associate myself with your remarks about what is at stake and what the realities are about health care in America and the misrepresentations that are being made by the president. Health care, the three most important issues in America's working families. That's why tonight we have so many guests who have taught us so much about how important the Affordable Care Act has been to them. I'm very grateful to Madam Senator Stabenow and our distinguished leaders from our Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, David Cicilline, Debbie Dingell, and then our colleagues who are here, Matt Cartwright. Who else is here? Matt. We'll be hearing from Matt and his special guest, and we'll be hearing from Senator Stabenow and her guest. But I want to thank all of the guests who are here, but also who will be in the gallery tonight to bear witness to what the president has to say and to give testimony in the course of the day to the press and others about what is at stake here. I want to introduce my guest, Cheyenne and Morgan, twins from San Francisco who are living with type 1 diabetes, who are also patient advocates. They came when they were younger, as they grew older, and the rest, and have borne witness to what this means to people with diabetes. It affects so many people in our country. Thank you, Cheyenne and Morgan, for your ongoing leadership. And Xiomara, who has complex medical needs, and her mom, Elena. They have been part of what the co-founders of Little Lobbyist, both of whom have been with us every step of the fight. And you're a little lobbyist too, right?
Yes.
What's your name? Hey, bought that. Another little lobbyist here. Shimora and Morgan and Cheyenne are some of my guests for the State of the Union, most of them here to talk about health care. They're showing the nation that the fight for affordable, quality health care is a life and death fight. In the election, Democrats made a promise. We had, for the people, we would lower the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. And we have delivered on that, passing bill after bill to protect the pre-existing condition, benefit, lower prescription drug costs, H.R. 3, and strengthen access to quality, affordable health care. And in December, we were proud, as I said, to pass H.R. 3, the Elijah E. Cummings lower cost drug cost now legislation. And just last week, just to make, we have, tonight President Trump, I'll talk about next week in a moment, will desperately try to distract the American people from the reality of his all-out assault on health care. But the public won't be fooled because they know in their own lives what it means. But here's the truth about what the president is doing. The president swears that he supports protections for people with pre-existing conditions, but right now he is fighting in federal court to eliminate this life-saving protections and every last protection and benefit of the Affordable Care Act. And that's why when Mr. Leader says, Mr. President, if you care about this, if you're really sincere about it, you will withdraw your lawsuit to eliminate all of that. After promising and to negotiate for lower prices during the campaign, he said, well, I'm going to negotiate because negotiation is the way to lower prices of drugs. He said, I'm going to negotiate like crazy. Well, negotiate like crazy must mean not negotiate at all because he's abandoned his pledge to support the drug price negotiation that House Democrats delivered in our Elijah Cummings Act. And then, just last week, the president unveiled his plan to cap and slash Medicaid. Medicaid would punish families across the country. This is people think of it as a low-income benefit, and low-income children do benefit from it. But many in the middle class, there's a middle-class benefit for seniors in long-term care, for families with pre-existing conditions who do have some health care coverage and private insurance, but need the Medicaid benefits as well. Rural hospitals, families seeking opioid addiction treatment, and middle-class seniors with long-term care needs would be ruined. This would be ruinous to them. How dare the president to do it? And we want to shine a bright light on this because it has an impact on so many people's lives. Democrats will fight this plan and will stand strongly against every last one of the president's attacks on families' health care. In stark contrast to the president and the Republicans in Congress who share his view and his approach, Democrats are for the people, fighting to lower health care costs by lowering the cost of prescription drugs, protecting the pre-existing condition benefit and other benefits in the Affordable Care Act. I'm pleased to yield the podium to the distinguished Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, Steny Hoyer of Maryland. Steny.
Thank you very much, Nancy of Maryland. The Speaker and I sat on the Labor, Health, and Education Committee on the Appropriations Committee. And we had an extraordinary, historic chairman who never missed a vote. His name was Bill Natcher. And he used to offer the bill as he stood on the floor and said, this is a good bill. It's a bill for the people. And then he would say, if you take care of the education of your children and the health of your people, you will continue to live in the strongest and best nation on earth. Let me remind you, he was from Kentucky. Tonight, President Trump will address the State of our Union, and Democrats will be highlighting the dismal state of his record on health care. President Trump, during the campaign, said he wanted to see the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, repealed. And he was going to offer a bill which would give you the best health care at lower cost and higher quality. He has now been in office for 3+ years. No bill giving more health care at less cost or higher quality. Now, he did celebrate a bill that the Republicans passed and got a bus and took everybody down to the White House about what a great bill it was. And he celebrated and said, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not sure he said exactly that. 2 weeks later, he said, I'm not for that bill. It is a mean bill. You remember, Madam Speaker? It is a mean bill. He has slashed, frankly, protections for millions of people without repealing the ACA. Joining many of us, our guests tonight, are Americans whose lives and health have been affected negatively by this president's policies and heroes working in our communities to help those needing access to better care. One of my guests is Star Barber. Star, raise your hand so everybody knows who you are. She is a leader and activist in Charles County, Maryland, who has dedicated her career to increasing access to quality health care for minority communities, ending maternal health disparities, and destigmatizing mental health care. My other guest is Vinnie DeMarco. Vinnie, who is president of Maryland Citizens Health Initiative. It's a coalition of more than 1,000 organizations working to expand access to health coverage and quality care in our state. And we have passed many bills to make sure that people were not harmed by Trump's reversal of health care access. They're just two of the guests who are here with us tonight to send a message to President Trump. Stop sabotaging health care access for millions of Americans. You promised to do that? You're going to brag about some of the promises you made? You said you would present a bill to the Congress of the United States which would lower cost, higher quality, better access. Everybody would be covered. That's what the president said. What he could not do, even with Republican majorities in Congress, this president is now trying to do in court and with his pen, undermine and repeal the Affordable Care Act. In contrast, House Democrats, Senate Democrats have passed 11, well, actually, Senate Democrats haven't been able to even vote on these bills. Correct. Have passed 11 bills since last January to protect and expand access to quality, affordable health care and to lower prescription drug prices. The senator from Indiana was on Meet the Press, and he said, we need to get rid of this impeachment so we can get to the people's business. Senator Braun, get to the people's business. We have sent you 275 bills, bipartisan bills, over 400, but 275 bipartisan, one of which will lower prescription drug costs, one of which will prevent the repeal of and continue the protection of pre-existing conditions. That is the difference on a full view tonight. A president who wants to take Americans' health care access away, and a House majority and Senate Democrats working tirelessly to make quality care more accessible to everyone. Let us hope the president will say that he is going to present a bill that covers everybody with better quality, more access, lower costs. Mr. President, keep your word to the American people. Now I want to yield to my friend, David Cicilline, the former mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, and member of Congress from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. And with a new haircut. Thank you, Leader Schumer, for noticing. Thank you to all my colleagues for being here and all of the guests for the State of the Union. 4 years ago, as a candidate for the presidency, Donald Trump promised Americans great health care. He pledged to keep protections for folks with pre-existing conditions and to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. But the fact is that Donald Trump has spent the last 3 years focused on one goal: ripping away health care from 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions, and he's in court right now fighting to try to achieve that objective. And he's done nothing, of course, to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. Well, I'm joined today by a guest who would be particularly hurt if the president is successful in taking away coverage for pre-existing conditions. Kerrigan Nelson is my constituent, an incredibly courageous woman. Last year, she was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a very rare form of bone cancer. Her family lost their employer-sponsored health care, but thanks to the Affordable Care Act, they were able to access affordable health care through the Rhode Island Exchange. And next month, when she turns 19, Kerrigan will be able to maintain her coverage through the Medicaid expansion made possible as part of the Affordable Care Act. President Trump is in court right now trying to take away those benefits from her and millions of Americans. And if he gets his way, millions of Americans like Kerrigan are going to suffer and not have access to the care that they need. As Kerrigan's mom, Tammy, told me before we got here today, today is World Cancer Day. So in honor of Kerrigan and the millions of cancer survivors across America, let's keep fighting to protect access to quality health care. Let's keep fighting to protect the Affordable Care Act. Let's keep fighting to make health care a right for every American, not just a privilege for the wealthy. And let's keep fighting to get a vote on H.R. 3, which would dramatically reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We passed that 2 months ago. And as Leader Hoyer said, it's been sitting in the Senate, and along with 275 other bipartisan bills on Mitch McConnell's desk. They deserve a vote. Americans deserve a vote on these two important priorities of the House Democrats: to drive down the cost of prescription drugs, to protect coverage for pre-existing conditions. Before I conclude, I just want to also acknowledge my other co-chair, Ted Lieu, who's on a plane right now coming in from California. He's bringing a former Olympic swimmer who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as his guest tonight. There will be about 100 healthcare guests between the House and the Senate who are here today to say to the president, get up on the podium today and say you're going to drop this lawsuit and help us fortify the Affordable Care Act, and tell Mitch McConnell to bring H.R. 3 for a vote so we can drive down the cost of prescription drugs.
And we all want to tell the president, drop the lawsuit. Drop the lawsuit. Drop the lawsuit.
And pass H.R. 3. And now it is my great privilege to introduce the chair of the Senate Policy and Communications Committee, Senator Stabenow.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. It's very simple. Drop the lawsuit. And we are all here because we understand that healthcare is personal. It's not political. It's personal for each one of our families. And we believe it to our core. That's why we fight so hard. That's why we fought so hard and were successful in stopping the Republicans and the president from repealing the Affordable Care Act. But what did they do then? They went back through the back door. They started into court. They're moving through the courts. And it's going to end up in the Supreme Court, and they hope it ends up there right after the election so nobody understands that their health care will be taken away till after the election. But if the president is serious tonight about anything he says about health care, he needs to drop the lawsuit. He also needs to drop the junk plans that he's allowing to go out right now that don't cover pre-existing conditions or any of the other protections that everyone up here is counting on. So that is the bottom line for us. This is personal, not political. Every American is affected in some way, every family. And I want to share with you right now my guest, Andrea Petrowski, who is here on behalf of her daughter, Louisa. We had an opportunity, come on over, Andrea. We had an opportunity back when the original fight was going on. She and her husband and Louisa joined me in Michigan when we were pushing back on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Louisa is special to me because I have a grandniece with the exact same heart ailment. In fact, I've been able to follow both Louisa and Leighton as very close in terms of the challenges that they've had, and they are both doing well now. But these are little girls with many, many pre-existing conditions that they will have their entire life. And so I want to thank Andrea and her family for being here. She's from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and I appreciate your sharing your story. Excuse me, I'm going to let you go do that.
Okay.
Right here.
Hi.
So.
Good afternoon. This is my daughter, Louisa. She is 5 years old, and she is thriving today. However, when she was born in 2014, we spent all of our time and energy fighting for her life. She spent her first 7 months in the hospital. She endured multiple surgeries, life-saving surgeries, open heart surgery. She had a tracheostomy. She came home on a mechanical ventilator, just simply to breathe. For a couple of years while she had a tracheostomy, which she no longer has, she relied on Medicare as a secondary insurance, and that gave us home nursing. So when she slept at night, we had the confidence that she would continue to breathe throughout the night. I'm here to share this story with you because it's very personal to me, and I fear without the ACA and the protections that children like my daughter, children with complex medical needs and disabilities, would be discriminated against and would possibly not have coverage that they need to continue to live and thrive. And thank you for having me.
Well done, beautiful.
Thank you.
Ben, come on up. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Congressman Matt Cartwright from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm a U.S. representative, like many of us here from the House, and thank you, Senator Stabenow and Leader Schumer, for having us. Like most of us, I represent about 750,000 people. That's my job. I'm here with my friend Ben Telly. He has a more important job than I have tonight. He represents 130 million Americans, people with pre-existing conditions. You know, I sit on the Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee in the House. And we fund the Justice Department. And we had the Attorney General appear before us last spring. Now, you know that normally an Attorney General of the United States is there to defend the constitutionality of duly enacted statutes of the Congress. That's the normal position. That's the default, that the Attorney General sticks up for the constitutionality of properly enacted statutes. We have an administration here that has turned that on its head. And I asked William Barr, what are you doing? You're throwing the entire weight of the United States Justice Department behind declaring unconstitutional the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, that thing that protects people like Ben Telly and 130 million Americans from having insurance companies discriminate against them for the misfortunes they've had in their own health care history in the past. It isn't right. That's the best part of the Affordable Care Act, and they're trying to upend it in court. And that's why it's my pleasure to introduce to you somebody who will benefit from the democratic efforts to stick up for the Affordable Care Act, to fight the spiraling costs of prescription medications. I want to introduce to you all my friend Ben Telly from Pittston, Pennsylvania. Take it away, Ben.
All right.
My friend Ben.
I like it.
Ben Corden used that as his slogan. Senator Corden.
Yes, thank you. It's certainly a pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank the Congressman from the bottom of my heart for the invitation to be here. Not only giving me a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see and view the State of the Union tonight, but as he mentioned, the most important job of representing so many Americans who are facing the loss of health insurance, loss of their prescription drug coverage. I want to share just a little bit about myself. I'm 52 years old. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes about 30 years ago. Through all the struggles with diabetes, about 3 years ago, I had a heart attack. Had required open heart surgery, a triple bypass, which I found out shortly afterwards that the triple bypass had failed. And now I have 3 stents. Shortly after going through all of that, I found out that my kidneys were failing. And I am now in end-stage kidney failure on kidney transplant list, and I'm undergoing home dialysis every night for 10.5 hours. Just yesterday, by coincidence, I lost my employer-sponsored health insurance. Because I've been on long-term disability for 3 years, through no fault of my employer, but that insurance ran out and I was no longer eligible for COBRA. And I faced the task of going through the ACA to get health insurance coverage. Now what scares me the most is that without that coverage, I would not be able to pay any of my medical bills. I probably wouldn't be eligible for a transplant, and I would not be able to afford any of my prescription drugs, which I'm on quite a few given all my complex health conditions. So, it really scares me the fact that there is this lawsuit sponsored by Republicans and the president trying to repeal the ACA, because without that, I know that myself and millions of Americans would be left with nothing and no chance for ever living a quality life. So again, it's an honor to be here, and I want to thank everybody, and very thankful for the fight going on to stop this lawsuit.
Thank you for being here.
Very
Good job.
So we're going to bring this to a close. I'm Debbie Dingle. Today's actually sort of a hard day for me. It was a year ago that I called Steny and Nancy and said I wouldn't be at the State of the Union because John was going into hospice. Steny flew out the next day, and John died on Thursday. But until the time that he died, he never stopped worrying about health care. And I went to the doctor with him a lot. And last week, the mother of a child that I met at Henry Ford, Debbie knows, said when there was word that she might lose her insurance, said, I don't know if my daughter will live if I can't get insurance for her. She was a juvenile diabetic. Today, I had a UAW member in my office who has a sister who has multiple sclerosis, and her dog is costing $3,000 a month, and the family is selling their home to afford it, and they may go bankrupt. You know, these aren't words, these are people's lives. I lived with a man who made me promise I'd never stop fighting to ensure that every American had access to affordable quality health care. The biggest danger to it right now is that what took decades to get, to ensure that no one would be denied insurance because of a pre-existing condition, that no one would not be able to afford going to the doctor. And the fact that so many people can't afford their medicine, I will work with President Trump. If he will help us lower the cost of prescription drugs, if he will drop this lawsuit, we owe the American people the right to be able to go to the doctor when they need to and afford their medicine. And that is what we are all committed to fighting for today. Thank you.
Happy to take any questions if we want to take a couple of questions. All right.
Great.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Apparently, we're pretty comprehensive. They had no questions. We answered them all.